From the great halls of their house, there are assembled three who hope to one day be the world's greatest driving heroes. Created from the cosmic legends of the universe comes our team captain, the Vision, Bill Fisher, and their soon-to-be Wonder Woman, Vicki Fisher, and our Captain Marvel and head flight trainee, Jennifer Scripchuk. Their mission: to fight injustice, share what is right and wrong, to get you out of your house and come out racing with them and serve all mankind. They are the Garage Heroes in Training Team.
Welcome to the Garage Heroes in Training podcast. I'm going to be your host for this episode. My name, Bill. Who else is hosting?
It's Vicki.
Yeah, that's right. It's just Vicki for now.
Vicki for now.
But Ben may be coming in later. You never know.
Ben Dawson.
He's out there dominating somewhere or putting the kids to bed, one or the other, something like that. We have a guest. We have a very important guest, part of our GLTC series. He drives with ASM Motorsports. He, I believe he started his career racing on home console video games. Then he went on to autocross. Then he went on to become a professional race driver, sought after driving instructor, national champion autocrosser. Recently won the one lap of America on his first time, probably not making a lot of people happy about that, but he was very good about it. He has won Pirelli World Challenge in 2016 in TCA and Pirelli World Challenge in 2018 in TCB. And right now, I believe he is in the midst of an autocross adventure that we'll get into shortly. So with that, I'd like to welcome Tom O'Gorman. Welcome to the podcast, Tom.
Hey guys, that was awesome. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're the one who did it all. We just got to talk about it. So, without that, we wouldn't have had anything to talk about. So, it's quite a resume. So, well, for those of us who don't know about you, just in case, besides the light blue sunglasses that they can see in most pictures, brief introduction for how you got into it.
Sure. I mean, you pretty much nailed it, but I guess to fill in the black and white with a little bit of gray or some details. I started, as you mentioned, with video games. That was my first exposure to motorsports, along with being a spectator at races at Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course when I was a kid. My dad started taking me there when I was about 2, and just my earliest memories, my formative years, all of that was just completely obsessed with race cars. I don't know. I remember coming home from school, if you had like a bad day in 3rd grade and you were mad because you couldn't color inside the lines or whatever, you like go to your happy place in your brain, and my happy place was Mid-Ohio. And I was always just obsessed with racing. So I got the chance to start as a participant when I was 15 and a half through my cousin, who's about 10 years older than me. He was autocrossing a little bit at the time. And my dad and I were both like, what's this autocross stuff? So we got to go see it when I was about 14, ride with him, and thought it was the coolest thing. And around the same time, my dad bought a Miata. And as you do when you get a Miata, you go autocrossing with it. So he and I started our participation in motorsports around the same time together at the same event, actually. And the slippery slope through my cousin, who had been nationally autocrossing, he kind of introduced me to more and more people, started taking me to national events when I was still 16. And that just really snowballed big time into what turned into 7 years of really full-time, like big focus on autocross. When I won my first national championship, though, I kind of realized like, oh, this is where the road ends with autocross, and I can do this forever, and I hope I can. But if I ever want to do anything else, some big team owner isn't calling me because I won an autocross national championship. So I had been working a full-time job and saved up enough money to buy a road racing car, bought a improved touring SCCA road racing car, club racing car, did 1 year of that, and then kind of had a lot of success with that car, and similarly kind of kept the mentality, if I want to keep pushing this, I have to try more and more things and bigger things. And I really wanted to try pro racing. So I was lucky enough, it was a flash in the pan kind of time where B-Spec was a national road racing class for SCCA, but also a pro racing class. And that kind of allowed me to crowdfund a way into pro racing that was very affordable. So I did a crowdfunding campaign that a bunch of people who I'd known for over all these years of autocrossing threw money my way and trusted me to do my best with it. And that allowed me to meet the people at Honda. And then from 2013 to 2016, I went from autocrossing to factory driving for Honda in essentially factory driving, I guess. I don't know where that line is drawn, but I was being given cars to race and put in race cars by Honda in that short period of time. So it became very big, very quick, and very surreal, for sure. And it's still surreal. So even to this day, been a good ride.
It has been. I think anytime you're not paying, I count it as pro. That's what we're going with. So it seems like, everything that I can think of that I want to do, you've already won. But do you have any more like goals or dreams or bucket list items left? Is there a grand plan in your brain that's banging around that what you'd like to be into or get into as time goes by?
For sure. Well, I mean, even with autocross, I still have 2 goals left. And the first one is to win a Pro Solo Super Challenge. And if you're not familiar with Pro Solo, it's essentially 2 mirrored courses in autocross where you start at a standstill with a drag strip tree. And instead of the guy releasing you and telling you can go into the course, there's a drag tree that comes down. And when you go, or when it goes green, you go into the course. And you are essentially racing the car next to you through the course. And it's as close to wheel-to-wheel autocross as you can get, really.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, they always do this super challenge where all the class winners go into a bracket, and the basically face off in a bracket style competition, just like drag racing, and you have to match your dial in round after round after round. And for whatever reason, I have always sucked at it, and I want to win one of those super challenges really badly. And second, I want to win the overall index at nationals, which is the mathematical calculation that you were the best driver there, and I have never won that. So those are my 2 with autocross. And I just like doing any sort of event. I'd love to do rally. I'd love to do, been getting into a little bit of drifting. I'd love to do more of that. Someday I get to pro race again, maybe, who knows? It'd be cool to do some of those big billboard races like the Daytona 24. And I want to drive international tracks. I don't care in what context, but I want to go to the Nürburgring, and I want to go to Spa, and I want to go to Bathurst. There's tons of stuff. There's stuff to do.
Yeah, your favorite racetrack is the next one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
So how and why do you choose the cars that you do? And what are you currently driving?
How do I choose?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like we know what you're driving with the ASM team in GLTC, but it seems like your car selections have varied up until when you were sponsored. When I'm guessing the sponsor says, "Hey, why don't you drive one of our cars?" But up until that point, it seemed like you were kind of changing different style cars, and some people just pick a brand or pick a model, and you seem to have a little bit of variability.
So through autocross, because autocross is a pretty low impact style of motorsports, people are very free with their keys. They'll throw the keys around and let you drive different cars, because the worst thing you can hit is a cone most of the time. So even back when I was 16, people were letting me co-drive their cars at these events, and I got really lucky to be exposed to a bunch of different kinds of cars really early on. And also, I'd never really had my own car. I did for just a very short period, and then my street car. But because I was being allowed to drive all these different types of cars, I became, I think, pretty versatile in what kinds of cars I can drive and what how to adapt to each one very quickly. But honestly, I just drive whatever people will let me drive. Even to this day, I think, other than my own personal race car, which is a Honda S2000, one lap was by coincidence that my co-driver and car owner, Steve, had a Corvette ZR1. Or when I raced with Honda, I didn't get to pick what I raced. They were nice enough to put me in a Civic or put me in a Civic Type R or whatever it was. So I think because I was exposed to so many different styles of cars early on, I'm very adaptable from that experience. And that has paid off well now that I've had the opportunity to drive all these different types of cars and take these different opportunities and different events and kind of run with past experience and take that into the new events.
So we have a limited amount of your time because you're in the midst of a bunch of different things going on at one point in your life. And one of our questions at the end is, pretend that you're back playing your video game days and you can grab a hold of your helmet in your car and you can plop yourself into another GLTC car. Which car would you want to switch into?
Oh, this is tough because there's so many different, like, what track am I at? Who else am I racing as? I think the car that I'm most
choose the track too. So
yeah, because it's a video game, right? Okay,
absolutely.
Now, honestly, I because I've known a lot of these GLTC guys for a very long time before I even had my car, and because I do this coaching, I've driven a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the answers that it might be obvious, I've already driven them. One of my favorites was Aaron Lichty's Cayman.
Mm-hmm.
mostly because it's on a different style setup than almost any other Cayman I've ever driven, and it drives totally different than people would expect. And it was super fun. The car I haven't driven that I would like to try is probably Jeremy Swenson's Corvette, because I think
Purple car.
it looks like a lot of fun, but people also say it's just a really fast rocket ship straight line car, and I think it might discredit Jeremy a little bit. And I'd like to see what Jeremy experiences in the races, because it's such a different car than everybody else has or has had up until recently.
Yeah, it seems like Jeremy's got one of those cars that doesn't quite fit with the traditional GLTC crowd. So, but he's driving it well and doing really well this season. So no complaints there.
Mm-hmm. So I just have a question. At what age did you just start your process?
So I got a PlayStation whenever PlayStation came out. It was 1998, 1999. So I was probably 7. And I would say that's when it started, kind of, because I had the first game was Need for Speed. Second game was Gran Turismo. And as soon as I got Gran Turismo, the nail was in the coffin. It was like, this is, oh my God, that's still my best memories are Gran Turismo 2. But my first autocross when I was 15 and a half, and I had just gotten my temporary license in Ohio. So my dad had to ride with me on every single run for it to be legal for me to be driving the car. And it started the moment I was legally allowed to drive. And I think a lot of people think I karted because I was lucky enough also about 5 years into my autocrossing years, my dad decided he was tired of working for corporate America and opened his own business. And the business he settled on out of the blue was indoor go-kart track. So I worked at an indoor go-kart track. I worked there for 3 years, and I karted a lot in those 3 years. And I actually got in really good shape because of it, but I didn't kart up until then. And I still haven't karted much outside of that one facility in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Wow.
Yeah, probably made twice as much money not having to pay for your go-karting as he did working there. So
Wow.
Yeah.
What a job, just being that age. What a cool job.
It was cool. And I got really, it was right when I dropped out of college. So I had like a default family business to work for when I dropped out of school and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life.
Mm-hmm.
And working at a go-kart track every single day helped me kind of stay sharp with driving. And I always knew I didn't want to work there forever. Like I knew I wasn't going to be a family business kind of guy, but it at least held me over and let me save up for buying the road race car when I did take the leap into that.
Absolutely. So we know you're doing GLTC pretty much full time. I think you did the one stop you were announcing, but I don't think you raced that. But most of the time you're there and running. Is there any other race schedule that you have upcoming, or maybe in the middle of?
Yeah. So I think when this comes out, at some point, I will be in the middle of a road trip in a brand new Acura NSX that they were kind enough to loan me, and I kind of used my contacts from the pro racing days that. They were willing to loan me this Acura NSX. And I guess I wouldn't say that I'm racing full-time anywhere but GLTC, but I'm trying to do every event that I possibly can. So you mentioned one lap and the events that are going on right now. The first one is called UMI King of the Mountain, and it's a large purse invitational only autocross in Pennsylvania, where the past 2 years they paid out 10 grand to the winner. This year they pay out a total of $25,000 in prizes. And I got to autocross this NSX back when I was driving for Honda in 2017, and I thought it was going to be kind of a bad autocross car, to be honest. And I got to drive it, and it was spectacular. It was like, holy crap, this car is so good at this. And it shouldn't be. It's 4,000 pounds, and it's a giant wide supercar and whatever, but it was so good at it. So I kind of filed that away in the back of my brain, and then these big autocrosses that pay a lot of money popped up, and kind of remembered like, oh, Acuras are really good at this. And have some phone numbers for people at Acura. So I kind of put a little proposal together. Let's take it to this big autocross called King of the Mountain, and then we'll take it to Solo Nationals the next week and do it up. We'll see if we can win the 2 biggest autocrosses in the country with a stock supercar. So that's whenever this comes out, it's either in progress or has just happened, and hopefully it went well.
So I believe following you on Instagram mostly, I believe the only change you're making to stock is changing the tires.
Yes, so we're modifying just the tires. We're running a Yokohama AO52, which is by scientific measure, the best 200 treadwear tire just on pace. They're also crazy expensive and really hard to come by right now. So my friends at Grassroots Motorsports helped me source the size that I needed and find them through Yokohama, and we managed to get them just in time for these two events. So other than that, we got some alignment specs from the Acura Pikes Peak team that ran a couple of NSXs at Pikes Peak. And we basically put that alignment on the car as best we could, and we're calling it a day. So it was about 6 hours of prep, and we were ready to go.
Are you towing or are you driving between events?
Oh, we're driving.
What?
If you get an Acura if you get an NSX for 2 weeks, you're driving it down the street, right?
I know I am. I also wrote you today saying, hey, if you win this thing, are they going to let you keep it? But that's just me. I'm just a podcast guy. I'm trying to look out for my guests.
Yeah. I mean, hey, if I win, it's a $25,000 purse. So I guess that gets me along the way a little bit.
Yeah, a little. Unfortunately, it's only a little bit. Those things are not cheap, but they're very.
If I invested in GameStop, maybe I'll get an NSX.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, maybe.
So what was your biggest motivator that keeps you going? Like everybody usually has, I'm always curious about like a race philosophy that people have. And, there's these little tidbits that I pull from people that really help me out, that kind of change my thought process. And I wasn't sure if you had one of those.
Yeah, I find that fascinating too, especially now that I work full time as a professional coach. I'm learning that at the root of it, I'm an educator, and my education is motorsports, which I know a lot about, but I'm not an educator by trade. So I'm learning how to do that. And part of that is psychology and getting into the brain of the person you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always, the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that is my brother and I are extremely different people. And I've always had this motorsports to be so focused on, and it's been subconsciously or consciously the thing I've been working towards my entire life. And I don't know why. It's just been my passion the entire time, versus my brother, who is a jack of all trades but master of none kind of person, that
Mm-hmm.
he wanted to learn guitar. So he taught himself guitar, and he's not the best guitar player by any means, but he's really good, and he taught himself, and he seeks knowledge in all aspects, but in quantities that he can learn everything, a little about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always just had this passion for this one thing, and it's motorsports. So I think there's that I don't have any distractions, for better or for worse. There's just the one mental focus at all times on, how can I be doing motorsports as much as possible, because it's the only thing that I really am truly passionate about. But also, I think this is probably a by nature kind of thing. I'm just almost competitive to a fault. And I really, really, really want to do my best. I'm competitive with myself, I should say, not necessarily against other people, but I want to do my best all the time. And I was lucky that motorsports is the thing that I'm pretty good at, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're pretty good at something and also passionate about it, it drives you to be even better. And just that combination has, I think, because I've focused on it even ever since I was 7 years old, when I, got that first PlayStation. My mom pointed out when I was autocrossing at maybe, first couple of years, she pointed out how amazing it was that I was already, competitive. And I actually won my first national event I ever did when I was 16. And there were these little, flashes in the pan of like, you might, you're good at this. This is a thing that you're able to do well. And she pointed out that, well, you've been playing these video games ever since you were 7, and you've probably put in your 10,000 hours at this point to become a master. And I don't know that that's entirely true. I still think I know I haven't mastered it yet, but that hit me pretty hard when she said that. I was like, oh yeah, I guess this is something that I've really worked on by accident for a really long time.
Right.
I don't know that anybody can ever master this, but
no, I agree.
It's fun trying.
You're forever learning, and that's one thing that we pull from it is that you're just never going to stop learning.
Sure. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think the other thing about it is consistency, because there's so many moving parts in motorsports, and it's one of the only sports where the human is not the only factor. There's a machine involved too, and there's all this stuff going on that like this past weekend we were at the Grid Life event in Kansas at Heartland Motorsports Park, and I really didn't have a very good weekend. And I know on paper it looks like I had a good weekend, but I was in my head all weekend because it started off a little rough when we did our first practice session, and I was about a second and a half off the pace of the fastest cars. And I pulled the data from my teammate, Andy Smedegaard, who was one of the faster cars. And I learned that I was driving this sequence of 3 corners, turns 10, 9, 10, 11, and 12, just completely wrong. And I haven't been completely wrong about reading a racetrack in a long time. And it really got in my head. And it took me all weekend to come out of it. And I don't know that I really did come out of it, but there's always going to be those events where it's just not, you're not on, you're not in the right state of mind. So that's the cool part about it, is there's never a mastery. There's never a conquering. And sometimes that is a little rough.
So do you think it was you having a bad day or a bad weekend, or the track, or not meshing with the track in the car? Or what do you think the issue was? Because it seems like externally, and you never should judge everybody like one of the jokes we have is never judge your internal by somebody else's external. But from your external, it looks like Tom goes here, Tom kicks everybody's butt, Tom goes to next place, and repeat. But this time it seemed like you were having, even some of the posts that you had, it seemed like you were having a little bit of a tough weekend. And, you know, I was just wondering if you were able to piece together what might have contributed to it.
Yeah, I mean, I figured out, like the story I just shared about kind of reading the track wrong, and you get in your head about it. And I know I'm my own worst critic. Little bit perfectionist and a little bit of overly competitive sometimes. So when those two things go wrong, both of them, it's like, yeah, reflection, it was, you know, pretty easy to look back and say, okay, this is what threw me off, and I allowed these other things to kind of get to me. I was late qualifying sessions twice in a row, and those couple of things really those periods for a while to put you in check almost, so that you can diagnose yourself in the future. I remember when there was a reflecting a wall with progress, and I realized that my visual habits had really slipped, and I was not working on turning my head at all. I was looking, and yeah, if your instincts are good, that's great, but they can only take you so far. You still got to do the fundamentals too. So I had to put myself in check and refocus on the right stuff. And I think that just happened again. So sorry, can you hear the race car?
I just heard it. It was awesome.
It's okay. It's
ambiance.
That, you know, you got to give that feel. So since you're part of GLTC and you're one of the people we were trying to get for the GLTC series that we had, and it sounds like you have a very good car nearby. I guess let's look at the season so far. How do you think it's gone? There's been some highs, some lows. Overall, it looks like you're doing really, really well. But how do you think you're doing this season? Is there
highs and lows is absolutely the way to put it. So for a little bit of context, I raced for Honda up until 2019 into spring of 2020. And the plan was for that progress to continue. I had been testing the NSX GT3 car, and
you probably should get some dinner. It sounds like your stomach's growling really bad.
I have to go give him a hard time after.
I just want to know if he's got a button like underneath his desk, just for like that feel good feel. He just keeps hitting it. Just keeps hitting it. Just.
It's like that Verizon commercial right now. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
All right. So rewinding to how is GLTC going?
Yep.
Did you get any of the start of that answer? Is it pretty bad?
Very little.
You said highs and lows, and then you went robot, and then you left. So we might
robot song. So yeah, I mean, highs and lows is absolutely right. So for a little bit of rewind, I was racing for Honda up until 2020, and you know, things were growing really well, and it was getting pretty serious. I was testing the NSX GT3 car, and we were having conversations about where I was going to race in 2020, and it was very surreal, but like at that point, it was becoming a little bit comfortable. Like I'm going to get to race for a while, and then COVID hit, and they cut budgets, and the race car drivers that get paid to race are the first things to go, among other things. So that makes sense. but I kind of had to regroup on what I wanted to do. And in doing that, I kind of impulse bought that S2000 with, the intention to take it to GLTC. And I knew it was going to take a lot of work and a lot of time to get it competitive in GLTC, but I was so dejected by sitting at home, having, lost my pro racing contract and having no outlet for driving at all. It was just like, I need to get something. So I picked up this S2000 and it was an absolute disaster, meaning me. I was a complete disaster. I hadn't had my own race car in a long time. And I did not know what I was doing. I'm still not mechanically inclined by even a little measure. And the most complicated car I ever raced for myself was a Honda Fit in B-Spec. So it was a little simpler than a Honda S2000, like race car with adjustable suspension and all this stuff. So anyway, 2020 was rough. I broke the car quite a bit and I didn't know how to fix it quite a bit. And it was all simple stuff. Like I would break an axle and it would take somebody, like Andy, 20 minutes to fix that axle. My car sat broken for like 3 months. So it was just a big struggle through that. But there were little flashes in the pan. Like I was kind of running top 10 a little bit and I was on street tires for that whole season. And it's like, man, I know that I can get this car there. It's just, I don't know how to do it. And I had a lot of support as well from different companies that were helping me, get parts here and there. So the final nail in that coffin was the engine blowing up when we went to NOLA in November. And I think at that point, Andy Smedegard, who is now who I race with, AS Motorsports, that he felt bad for me. to be honest, I think he took a little bit of pity. Is like, man, this poor guy is breaking his car and doesn't know how to work on it and whatever, and I'm going to help you. So he had already become a little bit of a resource for me, and we made this plan together over the off season that we were going to put a K-Series motor in it, and it just snowballed really organically into now we are all part of the same race team, and we got racing liveries on all of our cars that match, and it kind of turned into we were able to acquire some extra parts, like some suspension from Reinhardt and some properly fitting wheels from Koenig, and my teammate from One Lap, Steve, helped me with tires when we won One Lap. That was kind of my reward, I guess, if you want to call it that, for helping win One Lap. And it all came together to all of a sudden I had a pretty genuinely front running S2000 that was capable of winning races. And I wouldn't have believed you a year ago if you told me that I was able to win GLTC races or weekends over guys like Feel. And yeah, I just knew that it was going to take a lot longer than that for myself to get a competitive car. And it happened way faster than I thought because everyone around me helped so much more. But I always knew I could do it if I had the car. It was like, I just need to figure out how to turn this car into a race winner. And what's cool is, I mean, yeah, I have the car now to win races, but it's still the hardest racing I've ever had to win. It's harder than IMSA. It's harder than World Challenge at the levels I raced at anyway. It's just so competitive and so hard, but also so much fun because it's like, it's a community paddock, whereas there's like a rivalry paddock everywhere else. You don't hang out with your competitors everywhere else. And somehow, maybe it's because it's only 3 years old. Maybe it's because it's just a different crowd. I don't know, but like we all hang out in our paddock spaces if we're not working on cars up until 20 minutes before the race, and then we go race, and then we go back and we
really.
And it's intense. There are times where someone who you consider a good friend does something, and you're just like, damn it, why did you do that? Come on. But I think there's also a really cool culture of like you can call someone out without calling them out.
Mm-hmm.
You're not accusing somebody of something. You're just pointing out like, hey, that wasn't cool. And that has rung true for the most part since it started, which is really awesome. And I hope that never goes away. So yeah, it's been, highs and lows for sure. But right now it's high, and that's pretty good.
I'm really amazed at how fast GLTC is like running up the ranks on what they're bringing in for racing, and how popular it's becoming.
I think it's just because they treat it. Well, first of all, they're not telling anybody how cool it is. They're just making it as cool as they can and letting people come. Right. Someone pointed that out to me, and I think that's totally true. But there's also, I think it's kind of the best of pro and amateur racing mixed together without the negatives of those sides. So, pro racing, what makes pro racing? Is it a broadcast? Is it a crowd? Is it media and PR? Is it fast drivers? We have all of those things. There's a live stream. We've had professional commentators. We have Kyle, who's essentially a professional commentator. He just made himself that, and now he is that. That we have photographers. We have, this group, Grid Life, that's so focused on putting out good content and putting out, making a big deal of it all. But it's still grassroots racing, and it's still, just guys working on their cars. So I think it's because it's compelling and it's genuine, but it's also the best parts of pro racing too. And we started doing a fan walk. So you go to an IMSA race and you can walk on the pit lane and see the drivers in the cars. We do that now. It's like, there's no reason we can't do all of those good parts about pro racing. And maybe we're not on, CBS Sports or whatever, some TV broadcast, but
not yet.
All the pieces are there. And I think that's why it's taking off so well.
Do you think that maybe it's because the GLTC is just more attainable? And like you said, it's more grassroots. So it is more ground up versus top down. Does that make
definitely.
sense?
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. It is expensive and the cars are highly developed. I mean, it's not little crap cans racing around. Like, they're serious cars. But I think it's a combination of that. It's ground up. It's community driven for sure. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's been really cool to see people from other series come in. People come from NASA and SCCA, and even some pro racers have come, kind of dabbled. Brian Heitkotter raced professionally for Nissan, and now he's racing there. And also, like I said, Grid Life invests in different things than other grassroots organizations might invest in. So we have the live stream, we have the things that make it feel more grand. And even if it isn't more grand, it looks like it, and that draws even more attention. So I think that's partly, why. If you look at maybe the next closest thing is the runoffs for SCCA, which is also amazing, but that happens once a year. Right. And they race once per class. We race 4 times a weekend, 10 weekends a year. We do 40 runoffs in a season.
Well, I mean, also, if you think about it too, and it just kind of dawned on me, is that before, especially in the before times,
pre-plague.
Right, pre-plague, and just the before times, that you would watch your pro racing sitting around cable TV or in a bar or something like that. Now it's accessible on your phone, so you can reach out and you can watch more and not have to have the big cable funding in order to watch a series and to get that promotion and to get all that out. Which I think is another appealing thing about what we're seeing in racing now. I mean, you can actually tap into any race series because it's in your hand now. It's on YouTube. It's on all these other channels.
Sure. And for them to invest in that, because the opportunity is there, but the cost is also still there. And I will be forever grateful that the organizers from Grid Life are willing to invest tens of thousands of dollars to have a really high production live stream for what is grassroots racing for a bunch of nobodies. to like put it on either end of the spectrum. I think that's part of it that works so well. But there's also, like you said, the technology is there now that you can get creative. And there's another series that I know of that races, and they do broadcasts on Zoom, where they literally put Zoom phone, like they put a phone on Zoom call in their car, and they all sign into the same Zoom call on Grid, and then you can watch every single person in the race. If they stream the Zoom call basically, and you can watch every person in the race, and then they have a call-in commentator who watches the Zoom stream, and it's a race production. I mean, that's
it shows up. It shows up on YouTube. It shows up on Facebook. It shows up on just all these other places where before, a lot of these race circuits and race groups would never have that kind of access, and it would kind of be more word of mouth unless it went on to like a special cable channel. So it's just amazing. It's just amazing, the good side of the internet.
Even the autocross this weekend with the NSX that we're doing, that's live streamed. Wow. Who would have thought autocross would have been a live stream for entertainment kind of thing?
Yeah.
here we are. It's very cool.
Yeah. I mean, you can live stream iRacing.
Oh, and we did a lot of it.
Yeah. It's funny. It's amazing.
Yeah. So not that I covertly stalk the GLTC series, but if I were to pick a race, I would say Mid-Ohio in the rain was spectacular and more than a bit wild. And I think you contributed very well to that. I believe it was on like turn 8, maybe. Care to expound upon Mid-Ohio in the rain?
Well, Mid-Ohio is my home track, and I've driven it in the rain quite a bit. I've driven it in the dry even more. And it was a weekend going into it that I'd already won some races in GLTC. It was my home track, and I wanted that weekend to go well. And very rarely does a weekend you want to go well go the way you want it to go. So
sure.
Going into the weekend, it was like a really, really exciting thing that we were all, amped up for, even more than a normal race weekend. We got through races 1, 2, and 3, and I finished second 3 times. Second place, second place, second place. And I lost to Eric twice, and I lost to DJ Alessandrini once. And those guys are my 2 best friends. So it was cool to race against them, and I didn't mind losing to them too much. But I also I wanted to win so bad. And the way the results had worked out into race 4, it was either Eric or I were going to win the weekend, whoever finished ahead. It didn't matter what position we finished in. We could both finish last and laster, and whoever finished last and not laster would win the weekend. So both of us knew that, and then it started to rain, and both of us know Mid-Ohio in the rain, and both of us are very fast there in the rain, and it was just this really amplified thing. So I saw that he was not up to speed as quickly as I was, and I had the opportunity to make a move around the outside going through turn 8 into turn 9. And I'd never been out there that far because he was where I normally would be, but I went further, and I found out that you shouldn't go further. And I basically spun off the track and spun through the gravel trap. And I remember thinking as I was spinning, the only way you leave this with any dignity is if you still win. And then the mind went blank, and it was just pure focus. And I haven't had that kind of really happen in a car in a while, but I found myself back and forth within a lap, and then he went off in the exact same spot, and I watched him do it. I had gotten back close enough to him to see him do it, and that was for that one lap, my mind was blank. And then I kind of came back to oh my God, now I just have to stay on the track, and I win the weekend. Holy cow! But I still wasn't winning that race, and I was like, damn it, dignity! I have to win this race. So I kept on it, and DJ and I had an amazing race in the rain for the lead, and I ended up hopefully saving some of my dignity because I was able to win that race.
I just got a question. How often do you red mist?
Not very often. Red mist meaning anger.
Yeah.
Just hyper focus and, letting your emotions kind of get a little bit over. And you have to check yourself.
Generally not very emotional in the car. I don't really have the red mist, but I have the focus. So those 2 things I think are separate for me. But
sure,
I really, really try hard to not let what happens in the car affect, how you behave. In iRacing, not so much. I'm a very cranky iRacer, but in a real car.
Oh yeah, we save red mist for TV.
Exactly. So, but I will say it's there's been some times, I've been confronted in paddocks multiple times for things that drivers were upset about, and they confront you while they still have the red mist. And it's pretty alarming when someone can't be calm in the paddock. What does that say about how you are in the race car?
Right.
And I never want to be that guy. So I try really hard to stay in check. It slips every once in a while. We're a passionate group, but whatever.
Sure. So I was lucky enough to see, I think you did a video, was it last week or the week before, on Mid-Ohio. Great track walk video. Awesome. I think you need to do one more lap, but it needs to be a wet lap at Mid-Ohio, because if there's a track that I need to have a wet track walk, that would be the one. And
I thought about that, but I knew it might rain going into that weekend, and I wanted the secrets for myself. So maybe now that the weekend is past, we're
past there, and perhaps this is supposed to be later, but it's fitting in now. So I've got to go to Mid-Ohio this weekend, and looking at the schedule for weather, it's supposed to rain the entire weekend. Fantastic. It's my first time instructing HPD 1 student. Might be their first time on the track. might be their first time on a track. Any tips for somebody who has to instruct a relatively new driver on Mid-Ohio in the wet?
Well, there's two layers to that, which first, I have a rain line track map that I made for internal use only, and I'll share that with you. So you can,
Awesome.
you can have that one. Just don't tell anyone I sent it to you.
I know nothing. People will support that.
For instructing someone for the first time, any track, the first thing I want to know is what their goals are for why they're there.
Mm-hmm.
I want to kind of know why they're, why did they show up? How did they find this? Are they starting a motorsports career or a motorsports hobby, or are they heard about it and they want to try it, or there's, all these different layers to it. And I kind of try to cater what I'm going to give them based on what they want to get out of it. Because I think an instructor shouldn't be a rigid experience. It should be personalized to the person you're working with. And then if I have to ride with them, I set ground rules. If I put my fist in your face with a clenched, stop, that means brake like you mean it, because we're about to crash, and you do all that stuff, right? Mid-Ohio in the wet, though, you basically drive the inverse of the line to the absolute extreme. And no one takes that seriously enough. But you have to drive, if you're going to clip the grass on the inside of the track at apex in the dry, you need to be almost clipping the grass on the outside of the track in the wet. That's how extreme Mid-Ohio is. Mm-hmm. And yes, you have absolutely no margin when you do that, but that's where the most grip is. Right. And that's where it's safest to be. So I think I watch people drive there in the rain and they try to move off the dry line by a half a car width or a car width, and that's not extreme enough. You need to go to the opposite side of the track, and I promise you that's where the grip will be, including in the braking zones, including on the straightaways, all of that stuff. Right. It's a gnarly track in the wet.
It is.
Yeah, it's tough.
She goes, oh.
Vicki knows.
That was my first experience at Mid-Ohio, was in the wet. Okay. It was terrifying.
Yeah, mine too. Actually, my first experience on a racetrack ever was when I was, I think I was 17. I had gotten my own car and it was wet in Mid-Ohio, and I was so scared. Oh my God. Hey, we're here to live and tell about it.
I tell you, but then it was fun. It was really fun, and every time I think about Mid-Ohio, I think about it as like when you were a kid and you were playing that game of jumping from sofa to chair, whatever, and not to drop into the lava on the floor, because that's what it felt like, because you have to avoid all these spots to get around the track. It was just like zipping here and then zipping there. But that's what it reminded me of. Just don't fall in the lava as you're playing.
Great analogy, except the lava is the racing line.
Yeah.
Right. And it's all those little slick marks that are when it's wet. Yeah. It's crazy.
Shiny bad.
Oh my gosh.
So you've driven the professional route. You did a little bit of the privateer, your own car route. GLTC seems to be a bit of both in terms of prepping your own car versus having a car prepped for you. Do you have any thoughts on how that affects you as a driver? Is it a good thing, a bad thing, or
So last year I was doing it myself, and I had some help. At the time, I was kind of running my car out of Columbus, Ohio, where some friends, Eric Cotil would help me, and I would work on my car at his garage, or my friend Ed. He's Ed CZ on Facebook. His real name is Ed Colazzo, and he works at a shop. He would help me work on the car sometimes. And it's interesting because I was working harder than ever to have a car that was mediocre at best. And I felt like I was driving better than ever. And I think I'm a driver that the less I think about it, the better I do, kind of thing, if that makes sense. So I was almost having to just compartmentalize the work and the driving. And I was driving really well, but the work was keeping me back, I guess. And I had a very similar experience when I got my B-Spec car and I had to take it into pro racing, and I was running it myself. And I was a mess off the track. Like I barely made any sessions. My dad tried to help. One time I went to an event by myself. I don't know who I thought I was, but we made it through. But my driving, I think in 2015, when I did that, was also really, really strong. So there's something about staying distracted off track, however that works, that really helps. And this year I have Andy and the ASM crew to help with my car. And I'm doing a lot of professional coaching, and that goes hand in hand. We're supporting each other's businesses that way and working together as our own business essentially at this point. But I'm still distracted while I don't have to work on my car. So I think it's a similar dynamic, but it's, like you said, a little bit less privateer, more team. The cool part is I'm not a team with 20 people working on my car and I'm the only driver. We all have our own cars. We're all working on each other's cars and we're all supporting each other. So it's a very communal privateer team effort, which is kind of the best of both worlds to me.
Sure. I can see how sometimes it's good to clear your head and sometimes it's good to be able to focus, and probably it varies from race to race, I guess, but yeah.
So when watching the GTLC or GLTC, I'm sorry.
That one too.
Yeah, that one too. Sorry. It's been a day. So the tightness and competitiveness of the field is not like anything we've really seen before. And does it feel like that when you're in the seat?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really cool. It's almost like a balance of spec Miata, but all the cars are not spec. So it's like this really cool dynamic where cars have strengths and weaknesses. But my favorite part about it is it doesn't feel like the guy next to you is out to get you. They're still out to beat you, but they're not out to get you.
Yeah.
So, in IMSA and a little bit in World Challenge, and I think really in high level club racing with some of the different organizations, like some guys are willing to crash their car if it means that they might scare you into giving you the spot, or,
Right.
IMSA specifically, that was like a car width minus an inch. That was like, they're going to put you just a little bit in the grass to make sure that you can't carry any speed or you can't get any run at this position. So you have to learn to race accordingly almost. And GLTC is toned in a way that it's not really cool to do that. And sure you can, and that line gets blurred a little bit, but in general, the tone is not, I want to get you. It's just, I want to beat you. And
yeah,
it's a very fair approach, a very fair mentality. And I think it's self-policed as well, because it might be another race car.
No worries.
But,
That sounds cool.
That's Super K. It's a DCT swapped S2000 with a Turbo K series in it. Working on it. I'll let him finish.
The one lapper.
One lap car. Yeah, exactly. It looks different maybe than anything else.
right.
And I think that's because it is. And what I was saying is, I think it's self-policed in that 95% of the drivers there want to race that way. So when someone comes in, if we have 50 cars on the grid and 48 of them want to race one way, if there's one or two that don't race that way, they stick out pretty good, and they get
shamed.
It's not so much shamed. I hope people don't feel shamed, but I think we have a really good culture of, you can tell someone that you don't appreciate the way they're driving without making them feel like, little, like it should be a productive, you can point out, like this past weekend, this is a great example. I hope he's not embarrassed if he ever hears this, but there was a moment where I had a run on Eric Coutil, again, one of my best friends. Now that we're racing competitively against each other, there's a little bit of that dynamic on the track, and I had a run and he kind of juked towards me just a little bit right before I got alongside so that I couldn't go alongside. And in my brain, I'm like, damn it, Eric, why not? And I pointed it out after the race. It's like, man, did you do that on purpose? And he was like, yeah. I was like, don't. And he was like, yeah, you're right. I'm really sorry. And I don't think he'll do it again. So there's this.
We don't do that. We don't do that here.
Yeah, exactly.
You can say that for the other circuit.
I've absolutely done that too. I was trying way too hard in that rain race at Mid-Ohio, and a couple people checked me a little bit, not in a way that I was embarrassed, in a way that was like, you're right. I shouldn't be doing that. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to put on a really good show and have really good, clean, fair racing. So I think there's not a lot of shame in doing something wrong if everyone's trying to do something better all the time. And that culture exists there for good, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of like I think when we talk to Adam, he tries to make it a team sport, even if you're in the same race.
Yes. And that's been kind of cool. My most recent full-time job essentially was working for SECA, running the Track Night in America program. And I would work up to, I would work sometimes 50 events in a year. More recently, maybe work once or twice a month. And we always tell people at any SECA event that's not a club race, we tell them this is a same team kind of event. Whether there's a results sheet or not, you are competing with the people around you, but you are all on the same team to have a good time here. And that just kind of exists inherently in GLTC, even though it's mostly unspoken.
Sure. Sure. So there's a rumor I'm not sure whether it's factual, whether it's potential or not, but I thought you might be able to go into some of the pluses and minuses of the potential 200 treadwear tire restriction for GLTC.
I would love that so much. I mean, there's not really a lot of negatives in my opinion. The positives, I mean, there's the first level that I think most people think of it as financially advantageous. We're working on our 2022 budgets right now to make sure that we can kind of plan out our season when the season gets announced.
Mm-hmm.
And the budget difference between the tires we run now, Hoosiers, and the tires we would run if that happened, Falcons, is half. It's
Sure.
literally $8,000 for the year versus $16,000 for the year if we race 10 times. And that's like crazy because that's like a quarter of my income or more, depending on the kind of year I'm having. It's like, I'm going to spend how much on tires? What?
Yeah.
And to some people that doesn't matter, whatever. But I think it's absolutely advantageous for financials. But then there's also we're here to race each other and not the clock. So who cares how fast we're going? So I think it would be a better kind of no-brainer for that to happen. But then the final thing that I don't know many people think about so much, think about all the best Formula One races that happen. They're in the rain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you take away the grip, you take away the aero, you take away the invincibility of those types of cars, and you make the driver have to work a little more at it.
Right.
Putting street tires on these cars makes them move around more. It makes them harder to drive. It makes the mistakes more costly when they happen. And I think it would put on even better racing than we have now, because ultimately I think good racing comes from the biggest difference, the biggest delta in top speeds and minimum speeds.
Mm-hmm.
And your top speeds are going to stay about the same, but the minimum speeds are going to get slower because the grip goes down. So I think it's a win all around. And I look at, some of the best, most entertaining racing to watch is V8 supercars because they move around a lot, or trophy trucks because they move around a lot, or rallycross. It's like, let's make GLTC cars slide a little bit. That would be fun to watch, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm all for it. I would love it.
What about, I know this one's more for Vicki than for, hopefully for the audience as well. So Vicki's not familiar with Sunday Cup. So I always kind of view it as the little brother or the little sister to GLTC. Do you know much about it? Has it ever been of interest to you?
I look at it. Yeah, I'm definitely aware of it. I've driven a handful of them. They're very similar to B-Spec cars, to be honest. So they, I kind of came from that B-Spec world. And all the guys are the raddest guys. They're so cool. They're so fun. They're all there for the right reasons. And they're a ton of fun to hang out with. Their new thing this year is karaoke in the paddock. They put on karaoke versions of songs and sing them late at night in paddock it's just a good time. What was the question about?
Just kind of an introduction, because I think Vicki would get a kick out of doing it.
Sure.
And I'm not sure she's aware of it because she doesn't quite stalk the Grid Life YouTube as much as I do. Okay,
so it is it's a time attack class that came from Spec Fit. So it was all Honda Fits, and they were basically just on okay suspension and kind of okay tires, and that was it. And it started with like 4 or 5 of them, and now it's to the point where there's like over a dozen of them, and they run in the time attack class Sunday Cup, which is spelled like the ice cream sundae. And the power to weight is 22 pounds per horsepower, so they're really, really slow. And they run in formation in time attack. So they run, it basically looks like a wheel-to-wheel race, but in time attack. So it's all these little Honda Fits, which in my mind, they always look like little jelly beans going around the track. B-Spec too. And these guys are just partying, having the best time, going so slow, but they're driving at the absolute limit. So if you look at the lap times, it's not impressive. If you look at the driving, it's so impressive. Like I drive some of the cars sometimes and I'm like, holy shit, you went how fast in this car? Like I have to work my ass off to drive that fast. So it's super cool.
What do you think?
I don't know that I would buy one if I had options not to.
But I wouldn't mind driving a Skittle.
There you go. You can pick if you want a Honda Skittle or a Mazda Skittle. Or...
Yeah.
What do you think of a Sunday Cup wheel-to-wheel division?
Cool. It's that's B-Spec. So why not?
Right.
It's funny. I'll have to look into it.
It sounds like
for sure.
A good time.
So I have a question. So how much again, we ask this question to most of our friends that show up on our podcast, is how much do you think is learned and how much do you think is natural talent? I'm thinking that
Don't pollute the answer.
nature versus nurture here.
I love this question now. And I'm going to talk about DJ again, because I never thought about this a ton, other than I was told I was talented when I started driving a lot. So I never really thought about it, but you just kind of hear that a lot, and it's something that gets said and whatever. And it came up with DJ once, and he was like, I don't believe in talent at all. It doesn't exist. You learn things, you put in the work, and you get good at things by however that thing works. And if you want to get good at it, you put in the time. And if you don't want to get good at it, then you find something else. And I never thought about it, but this kind of ties back into playing video games since I was a kid. And there was this one thing that I was always so focused on. And it wasn't the actual driving. It was a video game. It was all this, I was watching racing. I was watching racing on TV in person. I was focused on it all the time. And all of that time, I think, is learning. And by the time I got into a real car, I felt like I kind of knew what I was doing. So sure, by the time I started autocrossing and driving a real car, it was like, okay, maybe, yeah, sure, I'm quote unquote talented at this, but I've also been working at it for a really long time, whether I meant to or not. And when I realized that, it was like, whoa, okay, this is a totally different thought process than being told you're talented or being told you're a really natural, good driver. But I also think that there are kind of personality traits that cater to certain things. And my personality, not necessarily my personality, but my brain, however my brain works, I cannot do math to save my life. I do not understand numbers. I can't add to save, like I have to count on my fingers and calculate stuff. And like my brain is not a numbers brain, but if you give me a puzzle or if you give me Tetris or something like that, just, put spatial concepts in front of me, that all makes perfect sense. Or memory. If you give me, those little puzzles you had to do when you were like seventh grade or whatever, and you had to remember the tray of items, point them out or remember them in the right order. That kind of stuff makes sense to me. And I think if you can apply the way your brain thinks to things in a way that makes you understand them, that makes you quote unquote talented at it. Or a thing like, there's no numbers in racing when you're driving a car. I don't see the track in numbers anyway. I see it in spatial concepts and momentum and the amount of space my car is going to cover and how much space I have to use. I know that I'm naturally inclined to be good at that versus numbers. So maybe if someone who sees numbers in their brain can turn the racetrack into numbers, sure, that works for them too. But I tend to agree with DJ more that you learn the thing you want to be good at in the way you can learn. And your personality lends itself to that based on, the way your brain fires. And then there's also are you a natural limit pusher or are you a natural rule follower? Or I think, natural limit pushers are going to be better drivers because they're going to try to find the limits rather than a rule follower. And I've worked with some who are rule followers. It's really hard to push someone to push a car to its limit when the rules say you're supposed to do it this way. So yeah, I think there's inclinations. If you want to call that talent, you can. Sure. But I love that conversation because I think half the people who just listen to that are going to be like, no, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, so it's an interesting topic.
I think a lot of it comes down to, how much work or effort you need to put in. For some people, it could be a little bit easier, but I don't think until you get to really kind of the limits, there's a limitation naturally. I mean, obviously there's some people who can just, do some magic, but, for the first 90%, 95% of, the population, they can all get to about the same place if they're willing to put in the time and the effort and the, interest, I guess. I don't know, but that's me. Anyway.
So, on your instructing now, Tom, now that we're heading that way. So your feelings on coaching, the right seat versus outside the car. Do you do both, I imagine?
I do a little bit of right seating and a lot of outside of car.
Okay.
I think to start, right seating is pretty good. I still don't like it. So I know that's controversial to say, but I don't want to right seat, but I think it's productive to start with, only in a breaking the ice, getting comfortable, getting confident kind of way.
Mhm.
But once someone surpasses like 5 to 6 tenths of the limit, where the car is actually kind of starting to move on the surface and you're starting to, test physics just a little bit, that's when I
Mhm.
want out. I do not want to be in the car. If I'm riding with someone, I never encourage them to go faster necessarily.
Mhm.
I am there to supervise and make comfortable. And
Mhm.
then at that point, um, it's tough because I think you need to have a level of self drive to get better until
Mhm.
you hit the point where a true coach kind of comes in. And that's the realm I work in now, where I'm working strictly on video and data, and I
Mhm.
can see what you're doing. It's after the fact, but I can see what you're doing, and I can look at the squiggly lines on the screen, and I can show you how to do it better.
Mhm.
Um, and I do think that there's a time in the middle where it's not productive to have someone pushing you necessarily. You need to have that kind of gaining confidence and getting rhythm and finding yourself as a driver a little bit between the
Mhm.
right seating and the getting pushed to go faster. And it's kind of stair steps, I think. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I totally agree with right seating up until the person is a race car driver. I
Yeah.
definitely don't want
Yeah.
to do that. But
Right.
but I do agree that there's absolutely things you cannot accomplish by being a supervisor from the side of the track or a data video guy. You need to help someone get confident first. And I think
So,
having that little safety net as a right seating instructor is what a person needs in a
right.
perfect world.
Right. Sometimes I found that more than right seating is having the person right seat and then the instructor drive the car. That has actually helped me in a sense that it gave me the idea of what my car actually has potential to do. And the eye opening was, as much as people, and granted, I'm just, little old me, um, in my level of racing
You're a
is
beast.
so, so having somebody explain it to you, but there's some people that actually learn by seeing it and feeling it. And it's like, that's what you mean. That's how close I can get. That's what that looks like. So,
Yeah, that segues perfectly into my model of coaching that I've kind of found for myself. And I don't know that I know many people who do it this way, I guess.
yeah.
Maybe I'm sure there are plenty of people who do, but I found it myself, I guess a bit. But
Yeah. It's like, oh, yeah, I see what you're doing here. Let me show you what your car can do.
yeah, and it came
And you're
out of
being too soft on your car because it's built for
exactly.
something more than that. Let me show you.
Sure. And this coaching that I do now kind of came out of, I would go to these Grid Life events starting in like 2017, and I never had my own car. And yeah, I was pro racing and I was doing as many events as I could and having a good time. But when I would go to Grid Life, I would kind of end up a little bit bored when everyone else was having their fun, and then we would have a great time at night. But I started just driving other people's cars and letting them ride with me and showing them, like, first it's fun for me to do that, but also I can show you kind of what the car can do. And it became a little bit of a thing where I would show up to the tracks and people would ask me to drive their car, do one or two a weekend or something and just have a good time. But I realized that that's a totally legit coaching model to basically work with people one-on-one and have them ride with me in their car and then transfer it over into this video and data coaching where
Mm-hmm.
it shifted from being about how fast can Tom go in my car to how can Tom help me go as fast in my car as possible. And part of that is getting this data lap and getting this exposure to what the car can do. So I most of the time will have the person, they get their weekend started, if they haven't been to the track or whatever, you go drive, you get up to speed, you find your feet, but then you're going to ride with me and we're going to set a data lap. So you have a lap time, you have the data running, you have the video running, but you also see it firsthand and you feel it. And then you can take what you've learned firsthand and we're going to use that video and data as a backup to reference and go see, here's where the time is, here's where the differences are in our driving, and here's some of not only what you can change for this track, but hopefully what you can change fundamentally so that you can take that to every single track you go to and every event you go to next. And it's been a really cool experience learning how that model is different and how to maximize that model. And my favorite part about it is most people who make their living as a coach, they do it at this, this really high level with really rich guys. And that's great. And I love doing that too. That's a different style, but I tried to build what I'm doing now around essentially the Midwest track community, which is Grid Life and more, where paying $1,000 a day for a coach is not feasible for most of these people, but paying $100 when you're feeling ready for it might be. So if I can get, 5 or 6 people in a day who want to get that kind of coaching, I have the time to do it. They have the means to do it. I can still make a little bit of a living, but I also feel like it's a much more genuine and a much more organic way to help people who are there for the right reasons get faster. And it's been really cool to lean into that. And essentially that's my full-time job right now.
Yeah, it's not a bad job. So what do you think about the data usage versus video usage? Have you used both, or do you enjoy one over the other?
I like looking at video first because I can see what's happening first, but video can be deceptive because what speed looks like and what speed is can be different. Mm-hmm. So I rely on the data to show where the time is, but I rely on the video to see what the person's doing. And I think both are super important. And I always start with the video first. And then I kind of get my idea of okay, I think I know where the time's going to be. And sometimes I'm wrong. I worked with a lot of drivers at NCM Motorsports Park this year. And a lot of drivers underdrive the fastest corners on that track because they are scary. That track is really hard and the fastest corners are scary. But I found that the majority of the time for people, once they kind of got within, maybe 10 miles an hour, 5 miles an hour of the top speeds in those fast corners, that wasn't where their low-hanging fruit was anymore. Their low-hanging fruit was in other corners that you wouldn't really think about. And when you watch it on video, it doesn't look that bad, but then all of a sudden that's where 7/10 is. Mm-hmm. And it's really cool to have the data to back that up and say, no, you don't need to worry about turn 5 anymore. Turn 5 is really scary and you're only 2/10 slow there. Turn 7 or turn 8 is not that scary and you're losing a second there. So let's focus on that so that your bandwidth isn't worried about how scared you are for turn 5 and going faster. You're fine there. Go faster here. And I'm loving learning how to be an educator, like I said earlier on the podcast, but it's also really fun to help people, like I said, who are there for the right reasons, spending every last dime they have the way I have, get better at driving.
Nice. So what are your typical driver issues? I mean, the ways to address and improve on each one of them.
I think a trend is, I think the thing that makes good versus great drivers is braking. And I'm sure you've heard that before. But the first thing is getting a driver confident to hit the brakes. As I like to say, hit the brakes like you mean it. They're there for a reason. And the harder you hit them, the more you stop. So what is it? So,
Vicki doesn't like the brakes or the gas pedal.
Shut up.
Yeah, but you gotta hit them. So there's that. That's the first breakthrough. And then there are drivers who are confident when they hit the brakes, but they don't come off them. And then that's the second key is keeping your momentum up by coming off the brake pedal and rolling your speed rather than shooting yourself in the foot by losing all your speed because you're on the brake too long, to be honest. So those are two things that I find working on quite a bit. You're raising your hand. I have two guilty parties here.
No, it's so let's walk through a hypothetical scenario. And let's assume
hypothetical.
Let's assume that there was this person and maybe her sister on the same race team, and they both do the exact same thing. They're going down the long straightaway. Let's say mid Ohio, going into China Beach, and somewhere around the flag station, they lift because when they get down to the end, those boards are going tuk, 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 and they're actually really fast on all the other turns, but the high speed, high brake zones, they're just like, and I
chicken out. I try. It's a courage thing.
It's not you. It's somebody else.
Oh no, it's not me. It's hypothetical.
Right.
Any suggestions or drills or mental weight that we can put on their foot?
Switch. It's a mental. You know what? I'm flooring it down, but all of a sudden I just feel like I'm going too fast. But okay, so I'm going to let you talk, and I'm see if
Don't
you're
defend yourself.
okay.
Well,
Go ahead.
first is a question. So you're on a team. Is there a driver on the team that's braking way later than you or lifting way later than you? The hypothetical person.
Hypothetically, her husband may be braking like 2 to 3 boards later, and
Okay.
also accelerating the entire time.
And you have proof of that without a
have-
doubt. You know that you could be doing it later. You just can't bring yourself to do it, right?
Correct.
Okay. So I think the easiest way when you have that reference point, hi Ben, is
Ben's here.
when
man in the
you
dark.
have a reference point that you know that the car can do more and you're having a hard time getting yourself to do it, is you go to reference points first, and you don't have to change from the start finish stand to the 4 board at Mid Ohio. That's a long way, but you should be working your way towards that point. And when you start to get scared, you don't default back to what you were doing. You keep pushing the same spot that you were. So Mid Ohio is a perfect example. If you're lifting at the start finish stand, but you know you need to brake at the 4 board, pick a reference point between the two, just a little bit past the first one, and do it a couple times until you're comfortable. And then when you're comfortable, if it takes 1 lap, if it takes 3, if it takes a day, you go to the next one. You go to the next one, and you go to the next one. Pick 10 reference points between the part where you start and the part where you know you need to get to.
Mhm.
And rather than getting scared and reverting, you can get scared and just try to make that become the new normal. And I have a personal experience with this. When I bought a car, the first car I ever raced, I knew for a fact that it was supposed to go through turn 1 flat out at Mid Ohio, just turn in and go.
Mhm.
And it was a super slow Honda Civic. I knew that it was supposed to be that way, but I couldn't make myself do it the entire first session I had that car at that track. And I get into qualifying for the race, and I do the first lap, and it's like I broke. The second lap, I just lift, but I lifted a long time, and I get to the third lap, and I have a pit in my stomach down the entire front straight, and I know this is the lap I'm going to try to go flat out. But I know I'm supposed to be able to. Everyone has told me I can, and I was scared the entire time, but I did it, and it was messy. But I survived, and I did it the next lap, and it was cleaner, and I did it the third lap, and it was perfectly clean. And from that third lap on, it was the routine, it was the normal, it was fine. I think you need to challenge yourself to push the limits so that the scary part becomes normal when you are pushing that limit little by little. Because I'm never going to tell you just go brake at the 4, but if if there's a 6, brake at the 6 until 6 isn't scary, and then try the 5, and do that until it's not scary. Don't revert back to the 6 when 5 gets scary. Just keep trying the 5 until it isn't scary anymore, and then the next and the next and the next until you get to that known, this is where I'm supposed to be limit. Does that make sense?
Yes. Keep
So
moving
does the
forward.
Is the hypothetical person going to do it the next time at Mid Ohio?
I believe so.
Okay, cool.
Well, one of the two of them will. I mean, hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
Yeah. Ben Dawson. Look who we have.
Hey, how's it going?
We have one of your man heroes, Mr. Tom O.
Yeah, I had to join this call just because I'm such a big fan. I just wanted to hear some more of the TomO story.
So Tom, we've got probably the most technical question we have on our list of things to do before you head out shortly. But do your students get a free pair of blue sunglasses after each event? I'm dying to know.
Only if I forget them in their car.
Ah, very well.
You must
That
ride
has
around with a
happened
bag
a
of those
lot.
things.
I'm sure it has, probably.
Yeah. In
Yeah.
various glove boxes and cup holders around the country.
Yep. So Tom, we don't have a lot more technical questions, but we do have some very fun questions. If you've got a few minutes, we could hit a couple of them.
Bring it on.
Tom?
Am I here?
Oh,
Hear me?
Yep, there you
There I
go.
am. I don't know what happened that time.
I don't know. You were very shy.
Yeah, bring it on.
All right, so we have this thing we call it the Fast and Furious Storytime questions, where we try and get through and see who the driver is and learn a little bit more about what they are. inside and how they got to be where they are. So one of our classic questions is, we're going to win a lottery and we're going to buy a desert island. We're going to put on that island an awesome racetrack. It'll be an asphalt track, and we'll also have a dirt track. And as a give back to all our guests, we want to make sure that they have the right cars when they arrive. So we want to know, what 5 cars would you want ready, prepared, and ready for you when you come to our desert island racetrack?
5?
5.
Oh man, you guys are generous at your island. Holy cow.
We try to take care of our guests because they put up with us.
So I'm just going to go off of my experience with cars rather than try to pick stuff I don't know anything about.
Okay.
So the best street production car I've ever driven is a Porsche 911 GT2 RS. I would want one of those.
Yeah.
The best race car I've ever driven was a NSX GT3, so I'll take one of those. My favorite recent experience was drifting the car that you got to listen to in the background, which is the LS7 swapped BMW M3 called MS7. So I'll take one of those. That one or one like it is fine to drift. Let's see what else. I'll take the Porsche 914 6 that I won my first national championship in autocrossing, even though it might be garbage on a road course. I'll take one of those.
That sounds cool.
Crap, I'm running out of cars. I need to dream bigger here.
Well, we might break out a GLTC race. Do you have a GLTC race you want to?
I guess I should pick a race car that's not an NSX, huh? Yeah, let's do. I mean, my race car.
No, very well.
Why not? Because I even though I give it a hard time sometimes because it should handle better and should do other things better, I like it. It's my race car, so I'll take that. How about that?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We had a friend of ours, Jim. He came on and he's like, I want 5 Spec Miatas for me and my friends. I was like, all right, we'll do that too. So very cool. Ben, you got one?
I do have one. Who was your favorite race car driver when you were growing up, or who have you been a fan of that kind of got you roped into the sport?
I was never even aware for the longest time that there were people in the race cars. Like it was not on my radar at all that there were people in the cars, other than I knew I wanted to be the people in the cars. I didn't think about the people at all. I guess I like Jeff Gordon because his car was a rainbow, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
cool.
I think every little kid that grew up in the 90s liked Jeff Gordon though, so that doesn't really count.
Okay.
I really go ahead.
I was gonna say, is there anybody that you look up to or look laterally to and admire just that you know in the sport now?
Sure. Well, I think maybe like 5 to 10 years ago, I really became more aware of some of the people that I think I maybe get compared to a little sometimes, or would hope to be compared to is a better way to say that. The guys that kind of made it from nowhere. If you know their whole story, that's the tone of their story is they made it from nowhere. So the guys like Peter Cunningham and Randy Popst and the guys that just kind of like self-made their careers in motorsports. I think that's super, super cool. And I definitely started looking up to guys like that. Like I said, more like, 10 to 15 years ago. But right now I'm mostly motivated by the people around me that I think do things that I know I could never do. So there's like, this is awkward because he's in the other room. He might be able to hear me, but Andy is like so motivating because just like so much drive and so much motivation and go that like, I don't think I have that in me, but watching someone else have that does make me want to try. And Eric Catil is the same way. It's like a guy that he literally spends hours and hours and hours in his garage and doesn't want to because he wants to do well racing. And he's the first one to tell you, like, I don't like spending as much time on my car as I do, but I know it's what I need to do to be as successful as I am. And he is successful. Yes. People like that I think are, I guess it's still kind of a self-made thing, but they just got so much hustle and so much drive, and they do things they don't want to do because it means they get to do the thing they do want to do. And I find that so like, yeah, that's cool.
All right. That's a great answer. I was racing in a pit next to Randy this weekend at CMP.
Oh, cool. What was the event?
It was a Lucky Dog racing event at CMP for their Carolinas Cup they started in the last couple of years, and he was racing there with his Moose Volvo and was not having a good time with it.
No, it seems like that car might give him a hard time sometimes, but
Yes,
sometimes you just whose race car doesn't.
Yeah.
right.
I'm not raising my hand. So there's this concept, and I think it might be a car from a video game in your case, but there's this concept of the car that got you into cars or into racing. It's called the Taproot car. Is there a car that you can look back and say, yeah, that's the one?
Oh, weirdly, I think the first races I think of when I think like back when I was a kid were the runoffs at Mid Ohio, like in the 90s. I think it came to Mid Ohio in like 1996 or 97. And I always loved the SCCA production cars. Like, I don't know if you know the classes, but they're like, they can chop the roofs off and the windshields off, and they're like really, really low and wide, and they're all flared out. And a lot of them have like big box flares and these tiny little 13-inch slicks and stuff. And for some reason, I was like always really drawn to those cars. So I feel like that's like the coolest thing is like those SCCA production race cars.
That's cool.
But also, I mean, pretty much anything in Gran Turismo 2 is like formative. Which, I mean, obviously the iconic one is the Escudo Pikes Peak car, but there were like so many cool cars in that game that I was like, I just wanted to collect every single car in that game and drive every single car on every single track.
Yeah,
it was a little ADD.
Yeah, that's part of the fun of Gran Turismo, though. So
exactly.
I'm with you on watching the runoffs from Mid Ohio. I used to love I'd watch every single class. Yeah.
I knew there were some classes I knew were boring, and those were the classes that I allowed my dad to pull me away from the track and walk the paddock. But I would look at the schedule and I would say, no, I want to be back to the side for this. And I want to, we can go walk the track during, I don't even know. I don't want to throw any classes under the bus, but yeah, it was good.
So Jennifer, who could not make it, she's traveling, but her favorite question is, what is your favorite car movie or a car from a movie of all time?
Car movie. Ooh, that's tricky. Maybe this doesn't count. I don't know, but I love the Blues Brothers.
Oh wow, yeah.
The chase scenes in Blues Brothers. Yep. I think that was like when I was a kid, my parents would let me watch the car scenes and the music scenes, but not anything in the middle. And I never knew. I like to this day, I don't know why, because there's nothing that racy in that movie. But
no, not so much.
Yeah, that one, or maybe the Italian Job, but like the 2000s remake. That one's really good, I think.
The minis.
Yeah. Did I answer it? There was a second part, but I forget.
No, it's either a car or a movie.
Okay, yeah. Those two, those are good.
My son's currently on a Baby Driver kick, so that's his right now. So
I haven't seen that one. I need to look it up.
It's got some good driving in there. I don't know who did it, but it's pretty impressive. So you got one, Ben?
Yeah, I want to know, Tom, do your cars have names?
Sometimes they earn names and sometimes they don't. Currently, my car does not have a name, and I wish it did, but it hasn't like given me one yet.
Gotcha. I understand.
I think the last car that had a name was Claptrap, which was from there's a video game called Borderlands. There's this really obnoxious little side character that like you need to finish the game, and he's always a part of the storyline, but he's totally obnoxious. And that was my B-spec car. Like it was required for me to get into pro racing. It was required for me to have that car, but it drove me nuts a lot of times. And it was just this like kind of crappy little race car. So I just started calling it Claptrap, and then we put a K24 series motor in it, and so we changed the C from Claptrap to a K, and it was Claptrap with a K.
Gotcha. That's cool.
All right. Well, since Miss Vicky's occupied with background noise, I get to ask a question that she absolutely hates. What is your favorite thing to order at or near a track?
Oh, Mexican food. But I don't really care about the Mexican food. I just want the free chips and the margarita.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any particular track have the best Mexican?
NCM has 2 that are both really legit.
Oh, okay.
So you can go to multiple different restaurants and still get good Mexican when you go to NCM.
That's awesome. That was the first track I was ever on where I was like halfway done, thinking I was done. And I looked at the flag station and I'm like, oh, that was a good lap. I think I got this one down. And I realized I'm at turn 15 and there's a lot more. Just
so much left, so much more track.
That's right.
I think NCM is the hardest lap in North America. I've determined that. I think it's the hardest track to put together and learn.
The one time I met you, Tom, was at a chump race up there. You were racing with the Hong North guys. And that's the one time I've ever met you. But this is also the one time I've ever been to NCM. And I could totally skip it again for the rest of my life. I'm not into it.
Oh, you didn't like it? Oh, man, that's like one of my favorites. I love that place.
I didn't like all the steady state cornering stuff. I think in the very back half. That's not that fun for me.
Sure, I get that.
But yeah, there are some fun sections on there for sure.
Okay. So I guess we'll end with let's see, the one question that people are dying to know at home. Jeremy, Hammond, May, Chris, Matt, other.
Who I prefer?
Yeah.
Oh, I could listen to Jeremy Clarkson talk until I'm deaf. I find that man immensely entertaining, and he could talk about anything, I think.
Yeah, he's a popular fellow, and
yeah,
he's very entertaining. Ben,
did you know he does a bunch of shows about like historical events and like other non-car stuff on the BBC, and I even find those entertaining, even though the topic is boring as hell.
He's got one on farming right now.
Yeah, I need to look that up. Apparently, I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
just Amazon, the way he speaks is entertaining to me.
Ben, did I miss one? I know you've been looking forward to this one.
Which one? No, I don't know.
Did I miss one, or you're good?
Oh no, I'm good. Thanks.
All right, Tom, you're a great guy. You've been doing really well. I think people are going to want to tune in and follow you. Is there a good way to follow along with what you're doing? Anything upcoming? I know we've got the autocross event that you're doing, so we might as well make sure everybody can find us.
Yeah, I mean, I try to post and share as much of the cool things I get to do as I can. So those are usually on either Facebook or Instagram. Instagram is at TomO Racing, and Facebook is TomO Space Racing. That's my page. But you can also friend me personally. I kind of use my personal page more than anything now. And you can also visit the AS Motorsports website if you're ever looking for coaching. We have a schedule of events we do for coaching on that website under our professional coaching page, or our tab, I guess I should say. But you can also get in touch with me or the website email address there, and we can schedule wherever else you want to go. So if you want to work with us one-on-one, you can do that. Or if you just want to follow, just send us a message, whatever. It's really cool. It's easy to forget how many people can see what you do when you post like that. And it's always great to get a reminder that people are watching and enjoying it.
Well, when this gets released, hopefully your first half of your autocross event went spectacularly. Congratulations.
Yeah, way to wear it out.
Yeah.
And good luck on the second part that's coming up right now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom,
Thanks,
very
Tom.
much.
No, don't know. Here he comes.
Oh.
Hello, sir.
Hi.
Oh, sick. I'm not in uniform.
That's okay. These are polarized. Neither one of us can see anything while we're trying to do this. So
You look great, though. That's all that matters.